We have an absolute barn burner of a poll question today at Smerconish.com. Here's a little bit of background before I get to the poll question and our special guest, Ellie Honig. From the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, this was from over the weekend, Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan was charged on April 25th with 2 felonies on allegations of trying to help an undocumented immigrant avoid arrest after he appeared in her courtroom. According to a 13-page complaint, Dugan, who's 65, is accused of obstructing a U.S. agency and concealing an individual to prevent an arrest. The 2 charges carry a maximum penalty of 6 years in prison and a $350,000 fine, but sentences in cases involving nonviolent offenses typically are much shorter. Specifically, the complaint says that Dugan assisted Eduardo Flores Ruiz, an undocumented Mexican immigrant, avoid being arrested by federal immigration officials at the Milwaukee County Courthouse after he appeared in her courtroom for a pretrial conference. Flores Ruiz, facing 3 misdemeanor battery counts, 2 federal agents eventually chased Flores Ruiz outside the courthouse and apprehended him at West State Street and North 10th Street downtown. After consultation with Ellie yesterday, the wording of the poll question today is as follows. If a state judge helps a migrant evade federal ICE agents, should that judge be arrested and charged with obstruction and concealment? It is 50 and change to 49 and change, and 20,000 people have already voted. This is Ellie Honig, the CNN senior legal analyst, who, by the way, will be here for me on Friday when I am, quote unquote, on assignment. So thank you for that in advance, Ellie. People love it when you guest host this program.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. I love guest hosting the program. I feel like, if Saturday Night Live had asked me to guest host, that would be the only thing that could top me coming in for you.
Well, there's time on the clock for you. You're a young man.
Yeah.
Ellie, yeah. I hold in my hand a 13-page criminal complaint. What is a criminal complaint?
Yeah, good question, because I've seen some of the nuances of this used in an attempt to manipulate what's going on here. This is the way that I can't put a number on it, but a 30, 40, 50% of all federal criminal cases start. There's 2 ways you can start a case. Way 1 is this. What it is the prosecutor writes up this document. You sit with a law enforcement agent, FBI, marshals, whatever. You make sure you have the information and you write out a document that will establish probable cause. Then you walk that document over to the courthouse and you get either a district judge, a federal district judge, which is sort of what we know, the full Title III judge, but much more commonly what we call a magistrate judge. And that's what this person is here. You get it signed by a magistrate judge, a warrant issues, and you're free to make an arrest. That's sort of method 1. And then within 30 days, it varies a little bit, then you indict the case in the grand jury. So that's all method 1. Method 2 is you just go straight to indictment. You skip the complaint part of it. But there's nothing at all unusual about the way this is done here. I've seen some frankly manipulative coverage saying, this is not even an indictment. This was not even signed by a district court judge. No, it's a complaint signed by a magistrate court judge, which any AUSA will tell you is completely normal, completely common.
And in this case, Lindsay Schlomer is a special agent of the FBI. It is Agent Schlomer who lays out and says, here's our version in enumerated paragraphs of what transpired, giving rise to the need to arrest the judge.
Exactly. And if people have this document in front of them, let me point you to the crucial paragraph in this, because much of this is just warm up and sort of
can I say I hope it's going to be paragraph 30?
Oh, I'm in 29. So maybe there's some carryover here. Okay. So I'll give you the key thing. And look, let me tell everyone what to listen for, because
but by the way, take your time and paint the big picture before we go right to the rub of it.
Yeah. Here's my 2 bottom lines. 1, this is a crime. When you strip the politics out of it, the Trump of it, the immigration of it out of this picture, it is a crime. It is a straightforward crime. It's not the most flagrant or offensive obstruction ever. Nobody got killed. No cell phones got burned. No witness got paid off, but it is obstruction. I don't think you can fairly look at this and say it's not obstruction. So that's number 1. It is a crime. Number 2, though, Michael, and this gets into your poll results, this is going to be a really, really difficult case to ultimately obtain a conviction on for reasons that are political, and we'll get into in a moment. But let me start with why this is a crime. Okay. I've seen some of the analyses out there saying, oh, maybe the judge did. It's all going to be about whether the judge took some affirmative act with an intent to get in the way of this arrest. People say sometimes, oh, and I've said, there is no obligation of anybody to help ICE or the FBI. If they come to your house without a warrant or whatever and say, hey, I'd like you to help. I know there have been stories about how Pam Bondi is threatening governors who say, we're not going to help ICE. It's not a crime not to help. You have the option of saying, we don't care to assist you. But that's different from what happened here. When I first saw the headline, I thought, oh no, have they started charging judges and officials who are declining to help? No. What this judge did is she took an affirmative act to try to delay or prevent the arrest. And that's what brings me to paragraph 29. So everything leading up to paragraph 29 is basically the judge is trying to slow play the agents. The agents, federal agents, immigration and other agents, show up in a state level court because they're looking for this guy, Flores Ruiz. He's wanted in state court because he has a domestic violence charge, and he's also here illegally. And now I know it's offensive to some people. I've seen headlines like, oh my God, they made an arrest right in the courthouse. That happens all the time. It is the safest place for federal agents to make an arrest because A, the person's going to be there. B, the person's not armed. They've already had to go through the mags and security. So this team of federal agents shows up in state court. They know this guy's going to be there. And the judge, for the first 28 paragraphs of this complaint, is, what are you doing here? Who told you? You have to go talk to the presiding judge. You have to wait over here. She's trying to just slow him down, but that's not.
May I interrupt? According to one of the averments, she goes so far as to tell one of the federal agents, I'm not sure if it was an ICE agent or one of the other agencies represented, to leave the building.
Right. So she tries to sort of, flash the robe a little bit and intimidate these people into leaving, which they don't have to do. By the way, they do have a warrant to arrest this guy. So it's not like they're there, just they kicked in the door or something. So here's the remember I said there has to be an affirmative act. And I think without this, it would be too thin to charge. But this to me is what crosses the line. Okay, I'll only read a couple sentences from paragraph 29.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So defense counsel, meaning for Flores Ruiz, who's the wanted person, defense counsel and Flores Ruiz then walked toward each other and toward the public courtroom exit. The courtroom deputy then saw Judge Dugan get up and heard Judge Dugan say something like, quote, wait, come with me. So the wanted guy's about to walk into the area where the agents are waiting for him. Judge gets up, according to the judge's own deputy, this is the judge's right-hand man or woman, says the judge gets up and says, wait, come with me. Now, I'm just going to go back to the complaint. Despite having been advised of the administrative warrant for the arrest of Flores Ruiz, Judge Dugan then escorted Flores Ruiz and his counsel out of the courtroom through the jury door, which leads to a non-public area of the courthouse. These events were unusual for two reasons. I'm reading still from the complaint here, two more sentences. First, the courtroom deputy had previously heard Judge Dugan direct people not to sit in the jury box because it was exclusively for the jury's use. Second, according to the courtroom deputy, only deputies, juries, court staff, and in-custody defendants being escorted by deputies use the back jury door. Defense attorneys and defendants who were not in custody, Flores Ruiz was not in custody, never used the jury door. And there, I think, Michael, is the affirmative act. The judge said, whoa, don't go out there. Go to this back door.
And I was simply going to say that the very next paragraph in the first sentence, Attorney B similarly, so now it's another account of what just transpired and that Ellie has read aloud, but now a specific lawyer is saying, here's what I saw. Attorney B similarly explained that after returning to the courtroom, Judge Dugan, this is what I underscored, forcefully motioned for Flores Ruiz's attorney and a male she did not know, Attorney B had never met Flores Ruiz, to approach. Flores Ruiz's attorney appeared to be confused by the judge's gesture, but complied with her directive. Judge Dugan commanded Flores Ruiz's attorney and the male to leave through a back door of the courtroom. Attorney B then saw Judge Dugan escort Flores Ruiz's attorney and the male through a non-public door near the courtroom's jury box.
Yeah, so look, to me, all of that crosses the line. And again, I've seen worse obstruction cases than this. I've seen witnesses murdered.
But by a judge?
Yeah, well, by a judge. And this is where some of the hypocrisy to me comes out, Michael, because I've seen a lot of garment rending. Oh, he from liberals, let's just say it. How dare he arrest a judge? It is an intrusion on the sacrosanct nature of our courts. I agree that you have to think harder about it and be more careful about it as a prosecutor. But these are the same folks who were gravely intoning when Donald Trump got arrested. No man is above the law. Well, no judge is above the law either. And I know plenty of judges who, if a non-judge had done this, had shown someone a back door to help them get away from the arresting agents, would bring the house down on them. So, look, I do think it's a fair point to say that's a precipitous line to cross if you're a judge or if you're a prosecutor charging the judge. But I think the prosecutors, based on this complaint, we always have to say it's a complaint. They have to prove it. But I think the charge here is warranted. I do think this judge committed a crime. I've seen some really interesting gymnastic style contortions to try to explain why it maybe isn't a crime. I mean, that'll be litigated at a trial, but I don't see it. Look, when you look at this whole complaint, I don't see any way to objectively look at this and say the judge did not have intent to block this arrest.
Ellie, you said that there's no affirmative duty to assist law enforcement. Broadly defined, right? Okay, so
Yep.
let's remove Judge Dugan from this and instead put in, I don't know, a talk show host, a carpenter, an architect. In some scenario, straight out of, I guess, a law school exam, law enforcement is in pursuit of a suspect, and a person does what this judge did, a non-judge, a non-judicial officer. Would that person be facing some type of criminal charge?
Of course. I'll give you an example. What if you got a knock on your studio door right now and you answered and they said, "We're here for the arrest of TC.
TC.
Sorry, TC.
Yes, good.
Yeah, TC
Thank
would
you.
never do anything wrong, but this is a crazy hypothetical.
Right.
But we're here and we need TC and we believe she may be in here. I've seen your studio. I know you don't have but imagine you had a jury door over to the side that TC would never be allowed to use, that she would never use, right?
Right.
And you said, "Hang on a second, officers. I'll be right with you."
there.
And you turned and you said, "TC, hit the side door. There's a fire escape out. Hit the side door." And then the officers came in. "Where is she?" And then they had to chase her down on the little plaza outside your office. You would get charged in 2 seconds for that. And that's what I mean by let's strip the emotionality of Trump and immigration out of this. In a standard context, that's an easy obstruction charge.
What could have been the outcome? What path could have been pursued? If not to charge Judge Dugan, is there some other scenario that occurs to you?
Yeah, there is. I mean, look, the fact that something is a crime is only the first necessary step that a prosecutor has to go through. You can see a scenario where I've done this. You say, well, it's a crime, yes, but A, you have to assess the seriousness of it. And B, you have to assess, is there some other way we can adequately handle this? Maybe through a civil case or something. What they could have done here, if they wanted to, is say, look, we got a bigger issue. We, the feds, are going to be making arrests. I've been part of these conversations, Michael. We're going to need to be making arrests in state courthouses. So let's get on the line with this judge, with the chief state judge, and let's make sure we have a protocol worked out. Who's going to go where can we make arrests? Where are you going to help us? That kind of thing. They might have been able to work this out in an informal way. But this brings me to a big point. The third thing you do have to think about is, are we prosecutors really going to be in position to get a conviction here? Now, it doesn't mean you only bring cases where you're 100% certain, but you've got to convince, ultimately this will go to trial. This judge is not going to plead guilty. You're going to have to convince 12 people, 12 Wisconsinites who are about 50-50 on Trump, let's just round off, to convict this judge. And that's why I think your poll is so insightful and instructive, because you and I had kicked around by text a version where I basically wanted you to ask, is this obstruction? Which I don't know where people would have come out. You tweaked it a little bit to build in, yes, it is obstruction. The way you phrased your question is, assuming this is obstruction, should she be tried or prosecuted and convicted? And the fact that that's 50-50 tells me that half the world out there, and you have a very moderate split audience, half of your audience, which maybe probably resembles what a Wisconsin jury pool would look like, has responded that even if this is obstruction, still should not be prosecuted. Big concern for me as a prosecutor. I'd be surprised if this judge ultimately gets convicted.
What could her defense be? What could Judge Dugan's defense be, given it, in the face of this complaint?
Here's what the defense will be, and I've already seen this from some liberal commentators. She wasn't trying to get in the way of an arrest or impede an arrest. She was simply trying to maintain order and the safety of all involved. And she was trying to make sure that nobody got hurt and that the right parties were in the right place and keep things orderly. I think that's bogus. I think if you look at the complaint, it doesn't hold up at all. How does having this guy go out the jury door promote that in any way? And by the way, let's remember what ended up happening. Flores Ruiz gets out of the courthouse.
Right.
There's a foot chase. Yeah. Right. I mean, what if he was jumped into a cab? What if he threw someone out of a car and hide? I mean, what if he ran into somebody? What if, that is the most dangerous situation, not the most, but it's a much more dangerous situation to have a bunch of cops chasing a wanted person with a warrant down the street. Can I also address one other thing that I've seen people get wrong? And look, obviously, I think some of the coverage of this has been very flawed. One of the arguments is, well, it's really a horrible idea to have agents making arrests in courthouses because you're going to scare people who are here illegally away from coming in as complainants or witnesses, right? So two things. One, that's a valid concern. I've dealt with that. But it is clear that this ICE group, it's a multi-agency group, but this group was not arresting witnesses or victims. They've done other cases. They're only arresting people who are showing up in court because they're criminal defendants, meaning A, they're here illegally, and B, on top of that, they've been charged with a separate crime, which, by the way, here's a quick way to tell whether your source you may be reading is biased or not. If it describes the charges that Flores Ruiz is on as assault, that's a biased outlet. It's domestic violence that he's wanted on. And let me add, if we're so concerned with the victims here, the victims of Flores Ruiz's domestic violence were in the courtroom.
Right. That's a very big part. Imagine them sitting there and now seeing the judge give him a get out of jail free pass.
I mean, more than that, showing him the get out of jail door. Right. Like, here you go.
By the way, Ellie, I've heard not asserted on behalf of Judge Dugan, but I know that there's a mindset of, well, the Trump administration is not showing any deference toward due process. And this guy probably isn't being given due process. Is there anything there that Judge Dugan can rely on and say, I was actually protecting his interests because they were going to remove him? No.
No, to the contrary, there had been full due process for this guy. A, the immigration officers went and got a warrant to arrest him. That's the way you're supposed to do it. B, he was appearing in criminal court to be, I don't know if it was an arraignment or a pretrial conference or something. So this was all happening within the context of the due process properly observed. The wrinkle here is the judge upended due process. And by the way, for all the people, rule of law. I mean, the one who upsets rule of law here is the judge. Everyone else was doing their job by the rule of law.
Can I say that in the newsletter today, I very deliberately published the criminal complaint. I didn't want to just go with a news story. I've had plenty of those about this case, but I wanted people to actually read it for themselves. I have another question for Ellie Honig, and thank you for being so gracious with your time. Ellie will be here Friday hosting this program. We're thrilled to have him. So imagine a scenario where the chief judge, because if you read the factual narrative in this case, Judge Dugan wants the advice of the chief judge in this Milwaukee courthouse. What if the bench takes the posture, we're not going to cooperate with the feds and we don't want any of these arrests being made in our courthouse? What kind of a standoff could result from that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So on the one hand, they could take a posture of, look, we're not going to bar you access from the courthouse. I mean, it's a public building, right? But we're also not going to do anything to help you, right? Because some judges, you can choose to help. You can, if you're the chief judge of that courthouse, you can adopt a policy where the feds can give us a list of names and we will tell you if one of those people is set to make an appearance. And then you can show up and we'll show you to the right courtroom and you can make an arrest. Some states do that, right? So you could take a position if you're the chief judge of, we will help you out, feds. You can also take a position of, we'll do nothing. Like, you can come in here, you can arrest people in the public areas if you want, but we're not going to get in the way. We're not going to help. We're going to do neither. What you cannot do is obstruct the way this judge has done it.
I mean, it would be so problematic if there were a position taken and the feds couldn't make apprehensions in a courthouse, because to your point, it's a safe environment to do so. And also, you've got individuals who, by definition, I'll say at least have been charged of something beyond their immigration offense. Why, of all places, would you want that removed from the spectrum of where you can pursue our immigration policy?
And I'd be interested to see, let's say a state court in, a liberal state took a policy of we are not allowing feds into this building to make arrests. Then you'd have a standoff. I think that would be wrong on the law. I mean, I think, first of all,
Right.
it's a public building. Second of all, the feds here have a warrant. So I think to start shutting out feds who are trying to come into state courthouses to make arrests like this would be majorly problematic. So, look, when I first saw this headline, I did a triple take. I said, "Oh no." Like I thought they were just arresting some judge who declined to help them out, the feds, which you don't have to do. You don't have to help out. But this judge crossed the line. I don't see any real objective question about it.
You've explained it in a very precise and concise fashion. I really, really appreciate it. It'll be interesting to see if you now have swayed it's essentially 50-50. Let's see where it ends up after the briefing by Ellie Honig. Thank you as usual. We continue to watch you on CNN, of course. Look forward to your being here on Friday.
Thanks, Michael. Looking forward to it. I'm coming down to Ardmore because I like to sit there. I love the little neighborhood where people have to understand where your studio is.
Okay,
the
Ellie,
most picturesque
let's
thing
hope
ever.
Let's hope that they don't appreciate where the studio is. Thank you.
It's in the most picturesque place ever. It's great. I love it.
I'm broadcasting live from the state courthouse in Milwaukee. That's what he means to say. Thank you,
Exactly.
Ellie. Appreciate
Thanks,
it
guys.
as always.